Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Adopting Power BI in Your Organization. My name is Archana Krishna, and I'm a Senior Business Intelligence and Analytics Consultant with Thorogood. I'm joining you today from my home in Philadelphia. I've been working with Power BI for a while now, but particularly over the last 2 years, I've helped several of our customers adopt Power BI and in their journeys, so right from architecture and design through to self-service strategy and trainings. And I thought it would be useful to just pull together some of my learnings and observations and share with you what some of the key considerations should be as you go along to implement Power BI. So a quick look at today's agenda. I'll start off with a bit of an introduction to Thorogood. I'll then talk about some of the challenges that we think organizations might face in their Power BI adoption journey. We'll then spend the bulk of the session really talking about this adoption framework. So some background to who we are. Thorogood is a specialist business intelligence and analytics consultancy company. We do operate globally, and we've got offices in London, Philadelphia, and Boston in the US, Singapore, Sao Paulo, and Bangalore. We help our enterprise customers with strategy, solutions, and services in the BI and analytics space. So right from BI and technology roadmaps to architecture design, end-to-end implementation, through to training and user empowerment programs. We are an independent company in that we don't work with one single technology. We work with most of the big players in the market and some of the niche players as well. We do have strong partnerships with our technology vendors. We've been a Microsoft Gold partner for a long time now. And in conjunction with Microsoft, we do run several events such as Power BI Dashboard in a Day, Azure Analytics in a Day. So if you are interested in attending any of them, they're obviously all being run virtual now. We've got details up on our website. So let's start by looking at some of the typical adoption paths that we see within enterprises. So how does Power BI actually get started? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk and excitement and buzz around Power BI over the last few years. So it's not surprising to have pockets of users just download the tool and explore it and see what's actually possible. And as they share that content with their colleagues, you can see that usage grows. But with that increasing usage, it does call upon IT to evaluate that tool and work out whether it's really the best fit for that organization. And if yes, they go on to define a strategy around it. Another part that we see commonly play out is that it's driven by a central technology group who are looking to evaluate Power BI and then define a strategy and process in terms of how they roll it out to different pockets of the business. But no matter how it begins, and obviously this isn't a mutually exclusive situation, they can very well run in parallel. The end goal is that you have successfully rolled out Power BI to all parts of the organization, to all parts of the world, and your users end up, deriving value out of this. And along this journey, irrespective of where you are in your organization, we do think there is some key considerations to keep in mind to guarantee success. But before we talk about what those considerations are, I did want to highlight some of the challenges that we think organizations might face in their Power BI adoption, starting with misalignment with business needs. So as with any BI technology or application, it is important to consider what your business users want and need and how they'd expect to engage with a tool like Power BI. So for example, Power BI can be used to deliver enterprise BI or traditional reporting, or it can be used to drive self-service style of working. But how does your business expect to engage with it? And shaping your strategy to align with that is a pretty key thing. And if that's misaligned, then that could be a potential challenge down the road. Balance between control and openness. So what do I mean by that? How much control does your IT group have on that platform? How much flexibility do you allow your business? Now, we know Power BI is self-service for reporting and analytics, but there's always a need for governance and control to ensure that your platform's working as expected and continues to be responsive. So, for example, if you just apply too many controls and it's a pretty rigid platform, it could deter adoption. But on the other side, if you just provide too much flexibility to the business, it could become a bit of a swamp and lead to performance issues. So just striking that right balance between control and flexibility is a decision that varies and is unique to every organization. It's definitely something to consider in your planning. Users in your organization may have different skills and should be provided training and support that is catered to that. So not providing sufficient training could be a pretty big deterrent to adoption. Proliferation of data sets and reports. So one of the challenges of self-service BI is how do you actually control the content that's coming out of this platform being produced by your users. So you could have different users working with the same data set, producing their own insights and sets of reports. And as that usage grows, you could have numerous copies of pretty much the same data set, different sets of reports. The more worrying scenario would be if you have completely different data points coming out of it. So how do you get a handle around this situation? I think we're all familiar that one of the most exciting things about Power BI is that it is continuously and rapidly evolving, be it the monthly desktop releases or just new features being released across the platform. So it is important that you're keeping tabs with this and making the most of what's available in terms of new features. But more importantly, ensuring that your platform and applications continue to work as expected with all of these new releases and that you're not adversely affected by, let's say, any deprecated features. And finally, we do see organizations having a multi-tool strategy, and that's absolutely fine, where you have more than one tool of choice for reporting and analytics. But it is important in these situations to ensure that there is clear communication and guidance on which tool should you be using in which scenario. So a potential example is you've got two different teams working with two different tools, but there is a business need to analyze that data on the whole and assess their overall business performance. And this could prove to be a technical problem to assess things across different technologies. So clear communication and clarity is definitely something to consider during your adoption and rollout plan. So with that, let's dive into the adoption framework. We've shaped this based on engagements and conversations with our customers. And this is really just a high-level structure that you will need to tailor and customize to make it work for your organization. So a good place to start is assessing where you are. Take stock of your current situation and work out where you want to be. You then jump into the design and implementation phase, which is really about architecting your platform and laying down all of the building blocks. Power BI is not just about that Power BI desktop tool where you build those nice-looking reports, but there's lots of other things that you should be considering as part of your implementation. And you then go on to enablement, where you really roll this out to different pockets of users and provide support as users begin to use it. And underpinning all of this is governance. So providing the level of control and oversight. How do you ensure that your platform is being used responsibly? So let's dive into details in terms of each of these aspects of this adoption framework, starting off with assessment. I should say that within each of this, I'll talk about some of the questions and considerations, but it's not an exhaustive list. But hopefully this throws up some prompts that are relevant for you and your organization. So within the assessment phase, the first bit that I'd like to talk about is objectives. Let's start by working with your business and IT community to really get a sense of what are their current challenges, what are their pain points, what would they like to see change, and what are their objectives in terms of how they want to engage with data and reporting. Of course, there will be an overall strategy that you have in your organization that considers a lot of different things. But taking in the feedback from your business and IT community is a pretty key input into shaping that strategy, because it not only drives value, but also ensures that you've got buy-in from these key user groups. Culture is a pretty unique thing to every organization. And if you think about data culture, you want to think about how is data made available, how is data consumed in your organization, how is data shared. So you'll probably have enterprise BI applications that is providing standard reporting. You may have a growing self-service culture, or perhaps one of your objectives is to drive that self-service culture and the mentality that BI is for everybody. So really getting a sense of where you are right now, where you want to get to, and what role Power BI plays in that is a pretty important thing when you're designing your platform and setting up the processes to manage it. Another interesting concept that we've been hearing about lately is the concept of a citizen data engineer. A citizen data engineer is somebody who is data literate, who has a good grasp of technical skills, and is really involved in working with your business, analyzing your data, and preparing and shaping your data to meet sort of wider reporting and analysis requirements. What this does is it helps mitigate some of the risks that I mentioned earlier in terms of data proliferation or inconsistent data outputs. One of my colleagues ran a session probably a few months back talking about citizen data engineers and the role that they play in self-service BI using Power BI. So if you are interested, the recording of that session is up on our website. People. So users in your organization may fall in terms of different ends of that spectrum in the way they engage with data and reporting. And that may be driven by preference, by the time they have, or by skills. So one end of the spectrum, you've got consumers who work with what they get, so predominantly descriptive style of reporting. You then have analysts who like to slice and dice and explore their data and generate insights. You then have data scientists at the other end of that spectrum who are more technically able, confident with data science techniques, and have a good handle of like advanced analytical tools. Understanding where your users are, where they'd want to be, is an input into your enablement and training strategy. The final pillar that I'll touch upon today within this assessment phase is getting a sense of your data landscape. So obviously you'll have a ton of data sources within your organization, but really understanding what are the primary sources of truth, what is the structure of your data, how mature are they hosted in the cloud, are they based on on-premises solutions? So this is an important activity to go through. Power BI can connect to pretty much like many data sources, and connectivity doesn't really tend to be a problem. But to really maximize the value that you're getting out of Power BI, you want to ensure that your data structures are supportive and designed in the right way to support that analysis. So with some of these topics, you've gone through an assessment phase, and we're now going to jump into the design phase. Starting off with identifying your architectural components. So which are the tools within the Power BI product suite that you'd envisage using? So Power BI Desktop to develop your reports, and Power BI Service, which is your cloud-hosted platform for sharing and collaboration, are the two most commonly used tools by most organizations. There are a couple of other offerings. So Power BI Report Server for on-prem based deployment, and Power BI Embedded to build custom applications, or two other offerings you may consider if the business requires demand it. Mobile is another interesting aspect to consider. By default, all Power BI reports are available on mobile, and you can customize that viewing experience as well. But how advanced is mobile usage in your organization, and what do you need to do to drive that more widely? Licensing. There are a couple of different licensing models offered by Power BI. You've got Power BI Pro, which is a user-based licensing model, where your report authors will need this to share and publish content. You then have Power BI Premium, which is a capacity-based licensing model. So you buy dedicated capacity, and with that, you get increased performance, increased storage. Many of the newer features that are coming out these days are also designed such that they're only available to Power BI Premium users. So there's some consideration that you need to give in terms of what licensing model works best for you. It's not an either-or situation, so you will need to use this in combination with each other. But some of the key considerations would be feature availability, or more realistically, a commercial consideration, which would be based on the expected usage and adoption. So identifying the right licensing model is a pretty critical activity to go through. In the assessment phase, we would have identified what are the different data sources that you have. But now we want to think about what's actually going to be used in Power BI and how they go about connecting to it. So for example, if Power BI is going to be used to connect to your on-premises data source, another component that you want to consider in your architecture is a gateway, which basically facilitates that connection to an on-prem source. So along with it, you need to think about design and all of its security controls. But then another thing to think about is, do you actually allow your users to directly access the underlying data source, or would you rather have them access an intermediate layer where data has already been pre-processed and surfaced in the form of a Power BI data set? So perhaps this is where a citizen data engineer will play a role. And you can augment this by using the feature, and it's a pretty nice feature of being able to endorse data sets. So to just highlight trusted and verified data sources. So there are a few aspects to consider here in terms of the kinds of data sources and how people connect to it. Workspaces, as you're probably aware, is a shared area for collaboration with your colleagues where you can host and publish data sets and reports. But there's something to think about in terms of how do you design your workspaces? How do you segregate content? Do you split this up based on non-production and production data sets and reports? Do you split this up based on business segments, based on who's authored the content, so whether it's IT delivered or business produced? You also want to think about who's got access to these workspaces, what level of access, the content that's actually hosted over there, how does that get shared and distributed more widely? All of these aspects around workspace design and usage isn't mandatory to consider, but just defining some baseline practices helps ensure consistency in terms of how your users engage with the platform. Obviously, security is a huge consideration, so you want to think about how your users access Power BI, where they access it from. You can apply security controls at many different levels. So at the tenant level, so it's just applicable for all users. You can apply controls on certain activities or certain groups of users. We've seen some of our customers apply a lot of security controls and some comparatively lesser. And obviously, this is driven by the business that you run and your requirements to comply with legal and regulatory rules. So there's definitely a need to work with your security team to shape what works and what you need to implement. The final aspect that we're going to look at here is administration. So all of the operational activities that you need to do to manage and maintain this platform. And over here, I'd like to tie this back to something that we discussed earlier, which is around that balance between IT and business. So here you'd want to think about who should own each of these activities and where's the best place for that responsibility to sit, and making sure you've got that right balance between control and flexibility over here plays a key role. So hopefully that gives you a flavor for some of the things that you should be considering in your design phase. Once you've got all of that set up, you're going to think about enabling your users and defining a rollout strategy. So how do you onboard your users onto the platform? Do you go big bang, or do you have a more phased rollout and a more measured approach? So you could identify small groups of power users and self-service analysts to start working with the tool and engaging with how you would publish and share content. You could also start developing enterprise BI applications so your users get the hang of how it is to work as a consumer for Power BI reports. But something that we think is pretty essential is to have information sharing sessions. So you're just making all of your users and stakeholders in the organization aware of the offering, the benefits, and why they'd want to use it. And it's a pretty good way to generate excitement, but also gauge demand in amongst your users. We've spoken a little bit about training. So you typically want to start with a foundational training to just cover the basics and providing some basic platforms where your users can get going. But almost always, as your users get more experience and get confident with the tool, they'll want to do more and will want some more focused training on certain topics or just intermediate and advanced training across the board. So you may want to think about defining a training curriculum and figuring out how you roll out this training. But alongside this more phased approach, what you do want to develop is that culture of continuous and ongoing learning to grow their skills and to keep up with all of the developments on the actual technology. So this continuous learning really takes us through to the concept of building a community. So having those forums where you can share your experiences, learn from others, and really be able to tap into that resources and people as and when you need it. I've got some suggestions up here in terms of the kinds of structures you could establish, but we've definitely seen our customers get tremendous value in encouraging these forums and driving participation. We're now going to jump into the governance section of this. So start off with best practices. So laying out some standard design and development guidelines so everybody's working to a consistent way of working. You may want to provide some standard templates and start points, so your users are getting a jump start, especially if they're starting from scratch. We then go into auditing and performance monitoring. So for those who are managing the platform, just getting an understanding of how your platform is being used, by whom, when, and in what way is pretty important to being able to plan for the future. So for example, if your usage is growing and you can say that your platform resources are taking a hit or sort of reaching the maximum limit, there is a need to scale out. If your reports aren't performing well, you want to understand exactly what's driving these bottlenecks and constraints. At the end of the day, you want to be more proactive than reactive in the way you manage this platform so your users are getting a more seamless experience. Power BI provides a number of out-of-the-box features to get access to these underlying metrics. So whether that's in the form of usage metrics or performance KPIs, they're pretty valuable tools that you can leverage. But there are some aspects of it that aren't covered by these out-of-the-box features, and you can get some of that information using Power BI APIs and commandlets. So whether you go down the route of building a custom application or make do with what's available and wait for new releases to come through, that's just a measured decision that you will need to weigh out as you implement this solution. The final thing I'll talk about over here is DevOps. There's obviously a lot of talk around DevOps with the need for agility, responsiveness, and more so with the advent of cloud and cloud applications. But how does Power BI and DevOps fit in together? Does it work? I think it's an interesting thing to think about. We've been having some conversations with our customers and how you'd implement DevOps. More recently, there have been some newer features in the space of continuous deployment that have been released, which I think is an exciting space to watch out for. But you do want to think about how you would implement DevOps in your organization. And if you did implement it, who would it apply to and who would be able to make use of it? So that pretty much lays out this adoption framework. I hope you find it useful and it's thrown up some questions and considerations that you can apply in your organization. As I mentioned before, this is a high-level framework and you will need to tailor and customize this to make it suit your business, your priorities, and your people. I will say that as your business evolves, your priorities change, and the technology platform in itself keeps changing so quickly, all of these activities that I mentioned over here isn't a one-off activity, and you do need to periodically review this. So establishing a center of excellence-like team who is responsible for that overall governance and management is a good investment to make to ensure that you are getting success and maximizing your investment in this platform. Just one final thought before we wrap up today. Power BI is just one part of that puzzle. It is an offering as part of a wider product suite known as Power Platform. There are some other tools that are part of this Power Platform suite as well, which is Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. All of these tools together are really designed to empower your business and build capabilities and skills across the board. The integration between these tools is also quite powerful. So for example, Power Apps, which is a tool to build custom web applications, can be embedded in Power BI reports. So you can now capture input from your users and report on that within a single interface. You can also use Power Automate workflows to, let's say, automatically trigger Power BI reports based on when your data changes. You can trigger notifications based on when KPI thresholds have been reached. So there's a lot that you can do by combining and integrating the capabilities of these different tools. So if you are thinking about using Power BI, thinking a little bit more broadly and including some of the considerations and capabilities of these other tools could help amplify your business investments and applications. And with that, thank you very much for joining me again today, and have a good rest of your day.